Hello, and welcome to our presentation as we follow those who sell throughout the history of Western civilization. The process for making beer was discovered in Mesopotamia as early as 9,000 years ago. No one knows exactly how the first beer was discovered, but it was probably the result of letting grain and water sit out for too long. Around 1900 BCE, a group of Assyrian nomads became traveling merchants who had extensive trade networks throughout Mesopotamia and Anatolia. In the process of trading, they carried Mesopotamian culture and ideas to distant lands. In our first attack, we were accused of selling goods without giving a receipt for them. Hammurabi's code clearly states that merchants are required to provide receipts for any goods sold. We had to swear before God and witnesses that we provided a receipt in order to successfully counterattack. Egyptians relied heavily on ma'at, and they believed that everything around them could and would affect their ma'at. Ancient Egyptian artists were not widely celebrated in their culture, at least not how we celebrate artists today. Works of art from ancient Egypt were rarely signed by the people who made them, but instead usually bore the name of the person who commissioned the piece. Minoans produced a variety of textiles, pottery, and metalwork that they traded throughout the Mediterranean. Their artwork was also exchanged along these routes, inspiring Minoan-style paintings from the Levant to Egypt. The Rosetta Stone has three different translations of the same piece of text. The top one is hieroglyphs, the middle is Demotic Egyptian, and the bottom is Greek. The Minoans and Mycenaeans are often referred to as the pre-Greeks, but this implies that they did not have their own identity outside of the Greeks. According to Greek historian Herodotus, Croesus, king of Lydia, wanted to attack his Persian neighbors, but before doing so asked the oracle if his campaign would be successful. The oracle responded that if he attacked the Persians, he would destroy a great nation. The oracle's pronouncement came true. Croesus lost the battle and his own nation was destroyed in 546 BCE. One of the most famous poets of ancient Greece was a woman named Sappho. She composed poems for a wide variety of occasions, but most often they were about other women. Women were seen as too erotic to seriously perform in ancient Greek plays. Athenian orator Isocrates was convinced that the only way to restore Greek unity after the Peloponnesian War was to invade Persia. It turned out Isocrates may have been right. Not long after his death, Alexander the Great conquered Persia, spreading Greek influence throughout the Hellenistic world. Sophists were professional wise men who taught that absolute knowledge could not be reached and that truth was relative. Praxiteles, one of ancient Greece's most famous sculptors, is believed to have carved the first full-size nude female figure, Aphrodite of Knidos. Although his original statue is lost, we can get some idea of what it looked like because it was widely copied and emulated. Wine in ancient Greece was much stronger than the wine we know today, and, as such, it was often watered down. It was the tavern keeper's job to ensure that the wine was watered down correctly. When Persian Prince Cyrus took over Babylon in 539 BCE, he immediately freed the Hebrews who had been held captive there for almost 50 years. Hey, isn't that mask supposed to cover your mouth? Alexander of Macedonia famously asked the oracle how his military ambitions would turn out. and the oracle responded that he would be as successful as the gods themselves. Alexander promptly took this to mean that he was a god, and started calling himself Alexander the Great. By the time of his death, Alexander the Great had conquered a vast empire stretching from Greece to the Indus River. For more than 2 centuries, Rome functioned as a republic, but gradually power became concentrated in the hands of singular rulers as Rome turned its imperial ambitions outward. Constantine is said to have seen a sign of Christianity in the sky before winning a decisive battle. After taking control of Rome, he made it a point to protect the Christian clergy and help them build more churches. Market day occurred every 8 days in ancient Rome. Children would have the day off from school, and merchants would head into town to sell their goods and talk politics. Nero is infamous for allegedly watching as Rome burned in 64 CE. Between 306 and 390 BCE, 2 poets named Paulinus and Ausonius wrote in-depth love poems to each other. However, later in life, Paulinus distanced himself from Ausonius, choosing instead to follow Christian ideals. In our third attack, the alemaster was told to shut down his brewery, because according to famous Roman orator Cicero, both alcohol and reason gave people an excuse to indulge themselves. We countered this attack by appealing to Aristotle, who said that life according to reason is best and pleasantest. In 532 CE, riots broke out in the streets of Constantinople between fans of different chariot teams. The riots were so bad that the Emperor Justinian considered fleeing the city. It was only the bravery of his wife, Theodora, that convinced him to stay. After the riots, Justinian invited all the rioters to the Hippodrome as part of a forgiveness party. After he had them all there, he executed every last one of them to make a point. If you've had Dr. Martin before, you know that history is littered with single stories. We hope these memes provide a broader perspective of Western civilization so that no single story dominates the narrative. When more conventional methods of making money, such as trade, became unprofitable, the Vikings turned to raiding and plunder as a source of income. The small kingdoms of 9th century Europe made easy targets for the power-hungry Vikings. Our second attack was about the Hanseatic League, a coalition of towns in Central and Northern Europe that provided mutual trading benefits for members of the League. The port city of Dorstad, located in modern-day Netherlands, was home to the premier mint of the Carolingian Empire. Dorstad coins bore the image of a ship and were widely circulated through Central and Northern Europe. In our fourth attack, we were charged with having coins that were minted outside of our port. Medieval coin regulations were oddly specific about which ports you could mint money in. Our best defense was saying that we got the coins at the market and had no idea there was anything wrong with them. Al-Mutanabi, a famous 10th century Muslim poet, led a revolt which resulted in his imprisonment. Along with the revolt, he also claimed to be a prophet, which was considered heresy during this time. The distinction between medieval inns, taverns, and brothels was often ambiguous. Most inns offered alcohol of some sort, and it was not uncommon to find prostitutes there as well. Often women who worked at inns and taverns were expected to please the male guests. Botticelli's Chart of Hell is one of 90 illustrations he painted for Dante's Divine Comedy. This is just a small selection of Botticelli's extremely detailed depiction of hell. Not only were old pagan temples used to worship the new Christian god in medieval England, but people were instructed to dedicate their pagan animal sacrifices to the new god as well. Pope Urban II was forced to develop a theology of war in order to justify the killing that went on during the Crusades. Hildegard of Bingen, a saint, said she received regular revelations that inspired her writing and gave her all of her ideas. The final attack proved to be quite a headache. Who can say who the true author is when a quote was written down by one philosopher who was paraphrasing another philosopher who borrowed those ideas from yet another philosopher? Mind-boggling. We have learned throughout Western civilization that the exchange of culture and ideas was primarily facilitated by those who traded and sold goods, because they were the ones who most often came in contact with other cultures. Cultural exchange enabled civilizations to incorporate ideas from other cultures and build on them, allowing for much faster growth than if they had developed in isolation. Finally, we come to our group's definition of Western civilization. Western civilization was not just the succession of empires that led to the development of the modern Western world. It was the interactions between those empires. Throughout Western civilization, cultural information was being exchanged by merchants and traders who brought new ideas home. Artists, poets, authors, and speakers then spread these new ideas, often congregating in taverns or alehouses. Without the efforts of these cultural exchangers, Western civilization would not be what it is today. We'd like to thank you all for watching our presentation, and have a great day.